Hello, and welcome to week 8 of Ari on TV. I'm Miss Jess. This month, we've spent our time together talking about healing. And today's episode is about healing by telling the truth of Thanksgiving. It's a really important thing for us to talk about. Before we do, though, welcome into this quiet place of beauty. We come from busy things. Pausing for a moment for the thoughts that quiet brings. Our chalice lighters this week are the Simmons family.
We light this chalice for the warmth of love, the light of truth, and the energy of action.
How does your family honor Thanksgiving? Do you have a ritual to share what you're grateful for? Maybe there are some traditions that are a part of your family's culture. We have special guest Miss Tracy here this week to tell us what Thanksgiving was like for her growing up in Philadelphia.
Hi, you guys. Today I'm going to tell you a story about Thanksgiving. When I think about Thanksgiving, the first thing I think about is gratitude. What am I grateful for today? Even today, with all of the stress that we have with COVID-19 and the elections and all these things that we have had a lot of stress in our lives for the last year. I want to talk to you about my Thanksgiving story and some things that I have to be grateful for. And I think that you can all find something in here that you can relate to. I want to tell you a little bit about my childhood. I was born in the city of Philadelphia. I lived in a little neighborhood called Fishtown. You guessed it. In my neighborhood, lots of people used to fish for shadfish. And it was a neighborhood that was surrounded by the fishing community a long time ago, in the beginning of America's birth. And if you know anything about Philadelphia, you know it's the America's birthplace. It was a lot of things were established there in America. But what I'm going to tell you about, I was the youngest child of 3 kids, and so I was the baby of the family, and I was treated like a little baby a lot of times. My neighborhood was kind of rough. The kids routinely got into fights on the streets in the neighborhood. Some kids cursed and smoked, but I was a quiet kid, a really shy girl with long blonde hair and freckles on my nose and cheeks. I felt sad when kids made fun of me for being chubby, being fat, but I felt the happiest at home, playing with my Barbies. I would play with Barbies day and night when I wasn't at school. My parents were divorced since I was 3 years old, but I lived with my mom and visited with my dad on Saturdays and on holidays. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about my Thanksgiving. On Thanksgivings, I would wake up early, watch Philadelphia parade. It was a big Thanksgiving parade. Sometimes I would go there in person. On cold November mornings, my mom would bundle me up in a thick pink jacket, cozy pink mittens, scarf, and hat, and send me out to my father's long gold Chrysler. Inside his warm car, I'd feel car sick because the heat was blasting on me, and I wasn't really used to driving in a car, actually. I usually took public transportation, a bus, a trolley, or something we called the L. It was an elevated train above the city. But I was feeling car sick because of all the heat coming onto my chubby cheeks, and I was all bundled up. But once at the parade, I'd marvel at the beautiful dancers in leotards on Broad Street. They would be tapping in their tap shoes down Broad Street, and I would look up at large Mickey Mouse, turkey, snowman floats that were towering above my head. My daddy said, "Wave," and I'd wave, hoping that Santa and his elves would see me and remember me and give me everything on my Christmas list, because I was such a good girl. From the parade, Daddy would pick us up put us back into his car, head for Aunt Mary's house. Once inside her house, we'd smell turkey roasting, pumpkin candles, pumpkin pies baking, sweet potatoes oozing sugar from the oven. Aunt Mary would kiss and hug me and offer me a cold ginger ale with a snack of pretzels and chips, celery stuffed with cream cheese and deviled eggs. After standing for hours in the cold, I welcomed the snacks into my hungry tummy. After an hour or so of listening to my dad and Uncle Walt yell at the football game on television, "Come on, you bum, why did you fumble?" I was ready to go home. So Daddy would say goodbye, we'd have more hugs and kisses, and we'd go back into the Chrysler with our layers of clothing, sweating for the third time in the back seat. Mommy would greet us with the smell of more Thanksgiving delights. Boiled potatoes, ready for milk and butter for some creamy mashed potatoes. Turkey parts settling by the stove, stuffing and marshmallows perched beside yams. Platters, pots, and tinfoil would be piled high and sent one by one around the corner from Fletcher to Thompson Street to Aunt Dolores's house. At Aunt Dolores's, all of our cousins played games while the grown-up ladies cooked, talked, and laughed in the kitchen. Dallas was playing the Eagles, and Ed, Les, and Tommy argued, "Pass the ball. What kind of call was that? Interference." The long table was set for 14 people. I sat at the end next to Cousin Shannon. My plate, barely visible, was covered with crispy turkey skin, covered with white meat gravy, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, string beans, rolls. My chubby cheeks squirrel-like, puffed out in delight. Years later, as I remember those childhood Thanksgivings, I'm thankful for the love from a large extended family, two loving, though divorced parents, and the happy traditions that I've passed on to my family. These days, my Thanksgivings don't include my mom and Aunt Dolores. They've passed away. But the foundation of love that they laid for me goes deep. Nowadays, I always check in with people from my congregation. They are now part of my new family. Do you want to eat turkey, greens, and potatoes at my house for Thanksgiving? Neighbors who need to stay in with elderly parents get a bit of my mother's traditional holiday hospitality, whether it's a batch of homemade chocolate chip cookies, pumpkin pie, or apple pie. I never forget to share my food and the love of baking and making people feel special. That, to me, is the joy of Thanksgiving. Thank you.
That sounds lovely, doesn't it? Thank you for sharing your wonderful Thanksgiving memories with us, Miss Tracy. Sharing our stories is really important. The memories we share and the stories we tell become a part of our shared history, how the people who come after us will remember us. As Americans, we share a collective history, and we share some of the same stories about what it means to be an American. The traditional story of Thanksgiving is one of these stories. And November is a good time to seek out the true story of Thanksgiving. Storytelling has the power to heal and is a good way to help heal the trauma experienced when a people are subjected to racism. I'm going to share with you a reading today called What Really Happened at the First Thanksgiving, the Wampanoag Side of the Tale, and it's written by Gail Corey Tonsing. When you hear about the Pilgrims and the Indians harmoniously sharing the first Thanksgiving meal in 1621, the Indians referred to so generically are the ancestors of the contemporary members of the Wampanoag Nation. As the story commonly goes, the Pilgrims who sailed from England on the Mayflower and landed at what became Plymouth, Massachusetts in 1620 had a good harvest the next year. So Plymouth Governor William Bradford organized a feast to celebrate the harvest and invited a group of Native American allies, including the Wampanoag chief Massasoit, to the party. The feast lasted 3 days, and according to Chronicle Edward Winslow, Bradford sent 4 men on a fowling mission to prepare for the feast, and the Wampanoag guests brought 5 deer to the party. And ever since then, the story goes, Americans have celebrated Thanksgiving on the third Thursday of November. Not exactly, says Ramona Peters, the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe's tribal historic preservation officer. It was actually Abraham Lincoln who used the theme of pilgrims and Indians eating happily together when he was trying to calm things down during the Civil War when people were divided. It was like a nice unity story. So, what really happened that first Thanksgiving? Well, there was a treaty, which is kind of like an agreement between the leader of the Wampanoag Nation at the time, Yellowfeather Massasoit, and John Carver, the first governor of the colony. The treaty basically said the Wampanoag would let John Carver's people be there, and the two separate groups would protect each other from enemies. So you might be asking, what's the deal with the meal thing then? You've probably heard the story of how Squanto assisted in the colonists' planting of corn. So this was their first successful harvest, and they were celebrating that harvest and planning a day of their own Thanksgiving. They were shooting guns and cannons into the air as celebration, but the Wampanoag didn't know what was happening when they heard all that noise. So Massasoit gathered up some 90 warriors and showed up at Plymouth prepared to fight, because remember, they had an agreement to protect each other from enemies. When they arrived, it was explained through a translator that the colonists were celebrating the harvest. So the Wampanoag decided to stay and make sure everything was okay. During those few days, the Wampanoag men went out to hunt and gather food, things like deer, ducks, geese, and fish. The colonists were always vulnerable to the new land. There were new creatures, new foods, even the trees were new. There were no such trees in England at that time. People forgot they had just landed here, and this coastline looked very different from what it looks like now. So the colonists were very vulnerable, and they needed the Wampanoag protection. Not just their support, but protection as well. So the Pilgrims didn't invite the Wampanoags to sit down and eat turkey and drink some beer. The Wampanoag were there for days. So of course they did some eating, and some of it may have been with the colonists, but it wasn't a Thanksgiving meal like the myth says. The Wampanoag give thanks more than once a year in formal ceremony for different reasons. For green corn Thanksgiving, for the arrival of certain fish species, whales, the first snow, the new year in May. There are so many ceremonies, and a lot of cultures have similar traditions. In this week's newsletter, I'll be sharing some websites and books your family can check out to learn more about the truth of Thanksgiving, and places you can go to learn more about the history and culture of the many different tribes of the indigenous peoples of North America. But in the meantime, let's share a song with our friend, Miss Leah.
In every place where I can feel I might get hurt, but I can heal. On my forehead, on my nose, in my belly and on my toes. In every place where I can feel I might get hurt, but I can heal. In my feelings are my needs. A little time and love can ease. In every place where I can feel I might get hurt, but I can heal. It takes forgiveness, it takes time, an open heart, an open mind. In every place where I can feel I might get hurt, but I can heal.
Thanks, Miss Leah. That's it for our show this week. I hope you'll take the time to bring awareness of the hurt the traditional story of Thanksgiving has caused Indigenous people in our country. But I hope, too, that you can spend some time with the people who are important to you, even if it's virtual, and share the things you're thankful for. Blessed be, my loves.